My name's Ely Delaney, and I have the honor of meeting some pretty cool people. These are the entrepreneurs, the artists, the creatives, the game changers that are making a positive impact in the people that they meet. And I'm a firm believer that the people that you meet can get you anywhere you want to go. And this show is my way of sharing them with you. It's my way of also helping you meet cool people. All right, welcome back to the show. Eli here, and we are here for another Meet Cool People. And today's guest is Bravis Brown. He is an amazing guy. I had the opportunity to meet just recently, and the conversations we had were just brilliant. So I knew I had to bring him on board. So, let me give you a little bit of background with him. Bravis grew up in an entrepreneur family, started work at a young age, and was promoted quickly to Fortune 500 companies and within the Marine Corps. He actually had a $2 million startup company in 2007, sold it in 2009 for $26 million, stayed on and helped them grow to over $50 million in just over 6 years. He's developed chemical manufacturing facilities along with 5 distribution companies. He's got over 20 patents. He's done 35 products. He's able to raise funds externally of $10 million for a manufacturing facility. This dude's done a lot of stuff. And during all of this, his company has received recognition for product development, winning innovation competitions. And this is where we're going to go to today. He has been voted the best place to work, which leads to what he is doing now. Let's fast forward today. He is helping transition recruiting from a transactional approach to one of collaboration. So with that, Bravis. All right. So, everything that you are focusing on is about that change of the idea of recruitment from transactional to collaboration. And that brings me with the fact of everything you've accomplished. Your methodology is a lot different than most recruiters out there. Let's give us a little bit more about that and your mind thought behind it.
Sure. So oftentimes you'll get a job offer. It'll have a job description, have some details about the business and what they believe to be most important. But what it doesn't really talk about too much is the direction of the organization, what their long-term strategies are, the growth expectations, and the challenges that lie ahead of them. And many times, especially in the more senior roles, you're looking for individuals to fill today's needs. And oftentimes we don't look at what tomorrow's are and who's going to be on inside of our organization that can help us bridge that gap. So understanding that more long-term view of where the organization wants to go, for example, if they've got a fundraise in their near future, the source and use of those funds and what type of execution is going to be required in this particular role to support those requirements as far as the fund utilization. If it's expansion, let's say it's international expansion that you plan to do in 3 to 5 years, and we bring somebody in that's never done that, you could incur consulting costs, or you could incur the inability to move the plan forward as you had originally decided. And that brings additional challenge to your businesses. So just understanding that, being able to ask holistic questions about the business versus just the role. And going online and looking at stuff is great. You can do research and you can try to understand a little bit more, but it's very often that at one level, let's say we're at a mid-level role, the description of what that person does and how they would expect them to do it is going to be different than when you get to the executive level and them having that 3 to 5 year plan in their mind, talking about what they may be required to do to support this role going forward.
Nice. And one of the things you talked about this a little bit about sometimes it's management that they have to think differently when they're bringing in that next person, or it's like they're afraid to delegate properly. And I'd like for you to talk about that a little bit, because a lot of times I've always found that people are excited about bringing in somebody new, but then they're not letting them actually do what they really need to be doing. So let's talk about that for a little bit.
Well, it's it's I find it's less of them letting them do what they need to do and more of a difference between the expectation of what they would be doing versus what they're asking them to do. And sometimes that changes from, for example, the hiring manager's needs and wants, and then the way that role is set up. And let's say it's system based. They may want to measure certain KPIs and understand the performance, but the systems may not be in place. So it becomes a very manual process, and this individual may or may not be the one that is, capable of implementing systems. They may be a very good executor of existing systems, but if they've moved into this role with an expectation of developing KPIs that'll help drive the business forward based on what they can bring to the business, and then those systems aren't in place, that's definitely going to modify how they perform their job. It'll make them, in their mind, more than likely less efficient, feel less capable, therefore possibly less satisfied with what they're doing and how they're performing and impacting the business. I do believe that individuals, especially in that senior level and up, their intent when they come out, out of the door or wake up out of their bedroom isn't, man, I hope I have a horrible day. It's, man, what do I need to do today? How am I going to accomplish it? I'm hoping I'm successful and able to drive the business forward. And I believe that's the majority of the leadership's start of their day. And sometimes that can quickly change once they enter into the workplace.
Nice. And so what was it with you making this shift from the companies that you had been, part of before? What was it that got you into jumping into this world of recruitment?
That's a great question, Eli. I still ask myself that question sometimes. And what I mean by that isn't that I like or dislike recruiting. It is truly a passion to get in that collaborative relationship and the ability to understand the business, tour facilities, understand their manufacturing process, talk to the individuals that are there, but taking a look at a facility and understanding capacity and asking questions about capacity utilization, how they're going to scale the business. Your long-term vision is this, XY $1 million, and you're currently at this. Is the capacity you currently have able to get to that level, or do you need somebody that can bring in optimization and get you there? And that leads me to what I did in my previous roles, which essentially the very last role that I had was CEO of a holding company where we developed multiple companies over time based around one particular additive that we had purchased. And we were able to enhance chemistries in multiple industries. So we're going to be working in some spaces that I'm not as familiar with. We moved from oil and gas to agriculture and life science products. So I had to bring an individual or individuals in to be the head of those businesses that we developed in the president role for those organizations. I had to bring in individuals that were experts in that space. And in that process, obviously, we've as a holding company decided where we want to go, what we're trying to accomplish, what our strategy is. In this particular case, achieving licensing agreements with essentially large players in different segments of the agriculture and oil and gas industry. So getting somebody in that role, a president, and then working with them strategically as to how we're going to execute the plan, building the team around them, and then also in that process raising funds to support the strategy and execution of the plan that we have previously put in place. So when I look at that, I think a lot about recruiting from the perspective of, especially if I'm working with a company that's looking to scale or grow their business, I'm looking from the perspective of what are some possible future hangups that our existing staff may have that now that we're in a position where we're bringing somebody else in to support and expand would need to have to help us navigate. And to me, that's where the priding and prodding takes place, just so that you can understand who it is that you truly need to source to be able to give them an additional skill set inside of their organization for their growth and strategy in the inside of the next 3 to 5 years.
Nice. And you brought up something really important in some of the language you just said. You're looking at where do they need somebody to be in 3 to 5 years, not just today. And I think that that's where a lot of businesses tend to be. They're a bit short-sighted on that. And I know when you and I originally talked, one of the things that I thought was great was when you were telling me the story about you bring somebody in for a specific skill set, but it's not necessarily the skill set that they were known for. They might be in a completely different industry, and people were just shopping around in their industry looking for the expert in agriculture or whatever. And you're like, no, we need this person over here because they have this skill set and they can adapt to that. So talk about that a little bit more, because that's something that so many people are short-sighted on and they don't think about that much.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll try to give a couple of examples. One of them, and this is a little bit of a diamond in the rough example, but one of them, there was a need for a senior product development engineer, and they were looking for somebody with a chemistry background, chemistry engineer. And, and it makes sense. You're working with different chemistries. Having somebody that's a chemical engineer is extremely crucial. I get that 100%. But looking further as to the challenges that the products may face in the manufacturing and process side, how our clients would utilize our customers would utilize those products in the future. And then essentially, as we scale the business, there's going to be several instances that that particular business would have to change and modify their manufacturing process to be able to get to the volumes that they were looking to do. So bringing somebody in that's a chemical engineer is great. Bringing somebody in that is also very mechanically minded, maybe not a mechanical engineer, but in this case it was, allows them to think through the dots that normal chemical engineer wouldn't connect. For example, you think of chemistries and you talk about some of the challenges in the manufacturing side. You could have foaming issues if you don't think through the manufacturing process and how that might work. And then in your formulation piece, you'll have some added steps. You'll figure it out, but you'll have some added steps that you'll have to go through that you wouldn't have initially addressed at the onset of developing that product. So that's why I like to understand, what are we doing today? That's perfectly fine. Where are we going to be going long term, and what changes may happen that this team currently doesn't have a clear understanding of. Conceptually, they maybe do, but maybe they need somebody that's got a broader bit of experience. So that would be one example. Another example, it's a smaller role in the organization, but you're bringing in somebody for AP. You know that this business is growing rapidly year over year. They've had 25 to 30% increase or more, and there's going to need to be growth inside of that organization. Talking through what are their career development plans, how do they plan to progress this person over time. And then you might find that, right now we outsource HR, but in the future we want to bring HR in-house. So you're now looking for somebody that's got that AP experience, but they also have some experience maybe in a small office managing HR, or they've got a dual role where they do HR and some accounts receivables, payables. And now that individual comes in and we can start to develop them more over time for that long-term HR role. But this isn't something where they won't be able to provide any guidance. They won't have any lack of familiarity, and therefore we like to think that we're going to minimize the possible discomfort for that individual as they transition, and minimize the amount of risk associated to that transition. Meaning, do they want to stay on, or are they interested in the role, or are they capable of the role? So those are a couple examples. I hope that addressed your question.
Yeah, definitely. And it's great to think about that because again, so many people they don't dig that deep. And that's one of the things that we find this in every aspect of business, but one of them, especially when you're looking at that recruiting phase of, okay, what's going to be, we're not hiring for the role today. We're hiring for the role in 3 to 5 years. And you always think ahead of that. And one of the things, you call yourself a generalist, and I know that that comes into a power, and it's very contradictory to what a lot of times people are looking for, or what we are taught in society. We want to be specialist in this thing, and that's the most important thing. Why is it that being a generalist is actually more important in certain situations?
Sure, I'll go back to the example with the chemical engineer and that team, and why you would need somebody as a general. So let's just assume that we have this amazing technology and we're going to be able to build 28 plus products and patents. Well, actually they were in the 40 plus products, 28 plus patents. That's great, but if somebody isn't raised up and looking further out, that process becomes much slower, much more costly, and sometimes that transition time is going to lose that progression that you had with essentially product acceptance. So if I'm looking at commercialization as my end goal, and I started out with concept, and I've got somebody that can get me through product development, but maybe doesn't understand the rigor and requirements of a field trial on that particular product, then that's going to cause some delay. And especially, like I said earlier, someone that can understand how the organization is going to scale, that they're going to be looking at those different moments for the business and how they're going to impact that chemical engineering department. And specifically, you bring somebody in the organization that understands maybe a little bit about the manufacturing, a little bit about distribution, a little bit about the service, definitely in touch with the organization culture development and creating collaboration. If they have those things under their belt, as we stated earlier, going and looking for that president that's in that space that addresses the targeted chemicals and clients. For example, you develop an XYZ product that is developed because it's one of the larger volumes utilized in XYZ space. And of that product being used at that high volume, who are the largest players that are utilizing it? Then those obviously become your target uh, companies. If you've gone through your essentially concept commercialization, you're ready to scale up and take on those larger players, then you're looking for somebody that is that specialist that comes in that not only knows ag, that's great, but guess what? They have experience with some of or maybe all of those customers. And by the way, they're very familiar with that particular product. They may not be the specialist on developing it, but they may know individuals that they would bring into their team that could be the sales tech support, so to speak. So again, it's a combination of the two. Both are very important. Having a generalist and a specialist. And I will tell you, I've had people want to talk to me till I'm blue in the face, or they are, on things associated to chemical and product development. And I'll try not to waste their time. I said, there's a level that I certainly need to understand, but when you go to that depth, there's an individual on the team that I think would be best suited to have this conversation, because I want my specialists involved in that, but I need to know when to bring them in, and that's going to be, I think, the value of bringing in a generalist, and the reason I like and utilize that term quite a bit, because if I'm targeting on startups and companies that are looking to scale and grow, I am looking at multiple transitions of that business over time. Maybe new products, maybe new customers, maybe multiple industries. We all like to find ways to use our existing products in multiple industries. So if I'm bringing somebody on that's got experience in multiple industries, maybe a little bit different on the products, but their contacts and who they may know and other people that could be specialists in that space would be someone that they could bring on. And I'm in a startup company that's raised $15 million, kind of a Series B fundraise, and that's got a source and use. And one of those things is going to be scaling that business into multiple areas inside of the U.S. If they've never done that, if they don't understand it, and let's say they're more of the founder that had the great idea that we can build a business around, but don't have that the expansion and business growth mindset, they'll certainly need to bring somebody in that could specialize in that. They may need to bring somebody in that's a generalist. Kind of depends on what role that founder is kind of seeing themselves move into, and that's another key part of understanding the individual and that senior leadership role, what they want to be, where they see themselves being most effective in the organization, and then helping build that team around them.
And you said something really important I want to really highlight just now. You're talking about like the founder has a great idea, they're doing their thing, they're growing the business, but they may see it at this level, but you're, because of your skill set and your experience, a lot of times you're able to take it to that next level up. And I love the idea of that because that's where your experience outside and you're thinking on a much bigger scale. And I've told you this when you and I first talked. It's like, it's not so much you're a recruiter, you're a strategist. You're thinking like all the pieces on the chessboard and 10 steps ahead, which is, I think it's super powerful for people to have somebody like you on their team for that purpose, because you're thinking about what's possible way above the vision of what's already in place. And I love that about that. So let's kind of start thinking about some of the things. What what are some of the pitfalls people need to be thinking about before, like when they're going to recruit that next person? What are some of the things they need to think about before they hire you?
There's some really simple things early on in the phase that, for example, an individual is leaving the organization. They've been there for 4 years. They're an amazing individual. Maybe they're even going to another facility location or perhaps retirement. Maybe got an opportunity because there wasn't one at that particular location at that time for that next level of experience. But nonetheless, the individual is exiting. And in that process, what we often, and not necessarily frequently, but often what we do is we forget to go back and look at the business, look at how it's changed over the time frame they were in that role, and modify that job description. Because what happens, like it or not, see, even with systems in place, that individual becomes a key part of the business as it grows, and they slowly take on some things that maybe weren't originally part of that job description, or they've then decided that they're going to essentially delegate parts of the role, and now this organization has developed some assistant roles or administrative support, or perhaps created other roles under them that have that delegated responsibility. And I see often that they've not gone back, looked at how their business strategy and direction has changed, and then modified that JD. And again, that's kind of a simple approach, one that probably isn't always missed. Others, though, that I believe can often happen is the connection of the vision and meaning. Where am I going to be as far as an organization in the next 3 to 5, and how well are they at communicating that vision? And so the individuals that are hiring for that role understand the responsibilities of that role. Again, not today, but where that role would possibly need to grow to. And I'm not sure if that addresses it exactly, but from there, if we need to dive deeper, happy to do so.
No, that's good. That's great stuff. And that's, you said that you don't know that gets missed all the time, but it probably gets missed a whole lot more than we realize. And because I've always seen that with businesses when they're hiring for that, and I work with a lot of smaller like solopreneurs or small teams, and it amazes me how much they want one person that's going to do 500 different things when it's like that's not really the right role for that person. So you're looking at it from that other aspect of that person might be doing different things, or they might be doing more, or they have an assistant that's doing a piece of it. And those are things we have to think about. That's where you come into play with that, is you're thinking about all those things that nobody else thinks about because they're too close to it.
Yeah, several times, especially when you talk about that the founder that originally started the business, they've taken on a lot of roles and responsibilities. One of the easiest things that can also be one of the most challenging, because they feel like they've done it, the next person should have to do it. That's kind of this role's responsibility, right? That's what we do.
Yep.
And that's fine. I'm not making fun of them. What I am stating is, as businesses grow, efficiencies and the effectiveness of the business has to be, you have to focus on that. So one of the things that I often look at isn't that individual can do all of those things. Maybe that individual has a great network and history of bringing in third-party consultants that can support that phase of the business, and not bring on that overhead and fixed costs, but have some variable costs just to get through that phase. And that goes back to the point of the generalist and the specialist. The generalist is now this individual that takes on maybe some key parts of your role, understands enough of the remainder of that previous role that they know how to delegate that. And I know this is one of your key and favorite phrases. It's also one that I love: automate, delegate, and delete. And that process with somebody who's taken it all on, had a hat with everything inside of it, that becomes challenging for them to see what should be delegated to free up time for that role.
No, and I love that. And yes, entrepreneur ADD is what I like to call that. We have a lot of fun with it. This has been really powerful stuff. I love the logic behind it. You said something else really important I'd like to dive into a little bit more also, is you brought up the fact it's about that person, that individual's network. And I think that's something that a lot of times gets overlooked as well when filling a position or finding somebody that's the right fit. It's not just their skill set, but what connection do they have that can help with that growth that we're actually looking for? You want to talk about that for just a second?
Sure. Yeah. when we look at the value of an individual, this goes back to kind of some of that transactional recruiting. They are taking that job description verbatim. They're reading through, understanding, hey, they need experience with this, they need experience with this. But I don't know often that they've looked at that individual's other resources that they're obviously going to bring to the job. So you hire me, and one of the things that you're going to need, or that you think you need, is I've got to get on this talk show called Meet Cool People. And the reason I've got to get on there is I've got to get them to understand more about me and the products I've created, but my team, because I've got this one amazing guy that I brought on and I need them to know about him. So I'm going to hire somebody that can do that. And this individual shows up and says, timeout. I've worked with this guy. His name is Eli, and he does this. And I think, we do one or two of these. That's a whole lot better than bringing on somebody at that next level in HR that could manage all of this, perhaps, or in marketing, more in the marketing side. So we could maybe defer some of that fixed cost for a little bit longer time and bring in somebody inside of our network that can bridge the gap. And that's the way I often refer to it. Is there a way we can bridge the gap so that we don't have fixed costs? Because leading an organization, you want as much of it, in my opinion, as variable as possible. I always feel a little more pinned down as the fixed costs grow. So bringing somebody in that has resources that can reach out to their network and get some support, that that may be able to transition um, your organization to have some more bells and whistles without having to bring on somebody at that more senior level that could could drive up your fixed costs. Does that answer your interest?
It does. I love that. I love the way you describe that. And that again, it goes back to your thinking strategically in how positions are filled and who we need right now for this thing, with that thing in mind at the same time. And I love the way you're doing that, because the reality is I mean, again, it goes back to that whole you're the strategist as opposed to just the recruiter. And that is so powerful because of the fact that you're thinking about that growth, and not just the income, but the cost savings. Okay, we don't necessarily need to take on this expense right here. We can have that stopgap that's going to help us and get us to that next level for the next phase.
Mhm.
And a lot of times people just don't think that far ahead. And I love the way you described all of that. So what kind of cool and exciting stuff is next for you?
All right, I'm going to answer that. You may even have to remind me that question, but I just can't let this piece go. This is for all my dot connectors out there. So an individual that is brilliant and obvious. Sometimes there's obviously an individual that created the products, the business, etc., and they are brilliant. There is a level of understanding that they brought to that business. They're the reason that it started and grew to what it is. However, what I always like to do with that individual when they start talking about where they want to go is do a process called mind mapping, and take their end vision and then take their current position as far as the organization and its capabilities, and show them each one of the possible steps and how to those all connect and how to pull them together. So when I talk to somebody and I'm asking them questions about their go-to-market strategy, and they're looking to hire somebody as, let's say, a operations manager for a production facility. Well, I don't understand why you really need to know about all of the details associated as to go to market. Well, depending on how you're wanting to do this, distribution becomes, a question that we need to look at. The logistics piece, of course, and this individual is going to interact with that if they don't oversee it. So let's talk about, locations of major customers, and where you're going to be focusing in the future, not just today, or as you bring on these additional products that you thought were very important, and they are. But how do we leverage them by getting to other places in the market? So that's why I might start asking questions that have to do with logistics, that in some companies is so separated from the production side that those two don't connect, and they don't understand what challenges they may be creating for the other part of the organization. So my dot connectors pull all that together and say, okay, this is how you're going to get to this piece, and this piece that we talked about earlier. These two things will have to be developed, and that'll allow this to connect, and it'll make more sense. And that's how you get to this next step. And I call that mind mapping. And especially with founders, the creators of businesses, they have beautiful visions of where they're going to be with products and processes, but how they get there, sometimes those steps need to be supported. All right. So thank you for letting me get on my box for just a second.
No, that was perfect. I love it. And I think in that aspect you kind of answered my final real question with that was like, what's one thing that people should be thinking about? You know, what's the one big nugget people should take away? I think you just kind of already answered that one. So I love it. If you got anything else you want to share with that one?
No, it would go too long, and it's a big
Okay.
soapbox.
No, this has been great stuff. And I love, you mentioned mind mapping. I love mind mapping. I do this with my clients from an aspect of building out their campaigns and their follow up processes as well, of how do you build that next level communication. And you're just taking it on a different aspect. It's when you can visually see what something should look like or what you really want it to look like, it makes it so much more tangible, and it makes it easier for you to see, okay, here's where the mistakes might happen. You catch those before they ever run into be. So I love that. So let's go ahead and land this thing. People are going to want to get a hold of you. So what is the easiest way for people to connect more Bravis?
Well, I believe we're going to provide a Calendly link as one particular way, and
Okay.
happy to utilize that. And we'll give contact information for the website as well. And I know you had given me some coaching, and I'm looking to create a landing page specifically for that. I'll give you the information at the end of this, and we'll see if we can't make that available for them.
Awesome.
But
We'll put it,
at
we'll
this
definitely put
time,
it below the notes on the show notes.
perfect. So at this time, a website, email, that information will be there. Be more than
Awesome.
happy to work with anyone through some of these processes.
Very cool. All right, Bravis, this has been such a pleasure. Great conversation. And you make my brain think. I mean, I'm not growing a manufacturing company, but I'm like, okay, no, these are some of the things I need to be thinking about for my next hire. So I appreciate all the wisdom that you shared with us today. With that, thank you so much. Get out there, everybody. Have an amazing day. And if you need anything, reach out, let us know. Take care. And that wraps up another Meet Cool People show. Now, if you like what you heard, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, or review so I can help introduce these amazing cool people to even more amazing cool people. And just remember, meeting cool people is just the beginning. You need to have a system in place to follow up with the amazing people that you meet. This is exactly what we do for our clients. If you'd like to see if my team and I can help you, go to followuprockstar.com and check out the case study video to see exactly how we're helping our clients turn casual connections into cash clients for life. Again, go to followuprockstar.com and we'll see how we can work together to turn you into a follow-up rockstar.